The first Australian company to be licensed to cultivate and manufacture medicinal marijuana, has praised the federal government's plan to allow exports of cannabis-based medicines. Privately owned and Queensland-based MediPharm is close to completing construction of a secure facility in a secret location on the Sunshine Coast. MediPharm founder, Adam Benjamin, welcomed Health Minister Greg Hunt's excellent export announcement. "It's very important from our perspective to ensure that the Australian patient gets medicine first. But in order to establish this as an industry, there does need to be a broader market," Mr. Benjamin said. "We consider the news another great step forward." MediPharm has an exclusive international intellectual property partnership with Israeli-based company, Tikkun Olam, which pioneered world production 12 years ago. Tikkun Olam will provide the mother stock for MediPharm's medicinal marijuana plants. "We're hoping to have these first genetic materials landed within a month and local production out the farm gate within the next 3 to 4 months, Mr. Benjamin said. "We were consulted by the Office of Drug Control, the federal licensing authority, last year about whether we were interested in exporting capsules containing medical marijuana, which is legal in Canada and where patients only need a prescription issued from a doctor. While we think it's a good idea, we are to treat Australian patients first, and in particular, we're treating Queensland patients first. If and above all of that production we can export, sure we will, but right now we're just focused on treating Australians." Mr. Benjamin said his company had not yet investigated export opportunities, but potential markets included Canada, South America, Germany, Holland, Spain and Israel. Those nations already have federal frameworks in place for legalized medicinal cannabis industries. Overseas markets could play a crucial role for Australia's formative industry, which is not allowed to stockpile product and faces delays in securing approvals for patients to be treated. Crop largely without psychoactive component. MediPharm conservatively hopes to produce enough medicinal cannabis products to supply up to 5,000 Australian patients this year, and contrary to many people's conceptions, Mr. Benjamin said just 5% of the crop will contain the psychoactive compound THC. Farmers growing medicinal cannabis have to protect their crop from ending up on the black market. "A lot of people get very excited when they think, oh gee, it's what used to be recreational and it's got this high, but really, 95% of our production will have no psychoactive ingredient," he said. "I think what's very important for patients and doctors is that once they get their heads around the idea that it's not making anyone high, it's got other medical components to it. Secondly, it's not being smoked. Someone might have chronic pain, another patient might have multiple sclerosis. We have all these receptors in our body that can work with hundreds of different medical cannabis plant strains." MediPharm headquarters facility is located in a secret area on Queensland's Sunshine Coast. "In our case we have exclusive genetics, so we don't mix and match. One part of the greenhouse will be growing for children with epilepsy, a different plant will be growing for chronic pain." Mr. Benjamin believed just 4 companies had been licensed to grow and manufacture marijuana for therapeutic use in Australia, 3 of which were publicly listed. An allocation of $2.5 million has been established to setting up the Australian Centre for Cannabinoid Clinical and Research Excellence at the University of Newcastle to coordinate federal trials. Construction of the growing headquarters of MediPharm, the first company in Australia to be granted a license by the federal government to legally cultivate and produce medicinal cannabis. Doctors awaiting education. Late last year, the Rural Doctors Association of Australia warned that many GPs were unprepared to prescribe medicinal cannabis, despite patients requesting access to the controversial drugs. Anecdotally, Mr. Benjamin believed just 11 scripts had been written in Queensland, 4 of which were for the same patient. "I know of plenty of doctors who have attempted to prescribe it, but they need to be pre-authorized by both the relevant state or territory health department and the Federal Therapeutic Goods Administration," he said. "That's what's put the handbrake on in Queensland, which has the most progressive health legislation in Australia. GPs can prescribe it in Queensland. That's not the case in all states." Mr. Benjamin believed that rather than being actively reluctant, many doctors were waiting for more education. "I guess what we've all got to remember is that the last time any doctor probably heard about the word cannabis was at med school, and they were told don't you dare touch this stuff at a party," he said. So in their mind, much like most of us, they're coming out of the back of recreational concepts. We're not saying this is a cure-all, but if you're the right patient and this is the right treatment, this is a new tool in a doctor's bag. If you're a doctor, you should be very well aware of all your tools. Economic boom overblown, says producer Time. A Nimbin hemp producer with interest in medicinal marijuana companies has poured water on claims by the federal health minister that Australia could become the largest exporter of medicinal cannabis in the world. Andrew Cavassalas has developed new varieties of low-THC hemp for use in fiber production and growing seeds for human consumption. Nimbin farmer Andrew Cavassalas said politicians were blowing hot air in claims of an economic boom. It's a good call that they would like to potentially be the biggest exporter, but in reality we really are a long way from that, Mr. Cavassalas said. He said there were only a small number of companies in the world that own a lawful source of cannabis, approved for scientific and medical research under international drug conventions. It's unpacking 80 years of propaganda. That's the tricky part, he said. For instance, in the United States, all those states that are doing medical cannabis, you have to understand that it's illegal federally. In those states, under the U.S. Constitution, they conducted citizens-initiated referendums that overruled that. There really is that bottleneck at the very top, all around the world, where researchers are in need of a lawful source of cannabis to do any kind of research so they can do clinical trials. The federal health minister's office has been asked for a response.